next speaker, which is our second last session for today, is, he doesn't need an introduction, but Dr. Amr Mohsen, who is with us here. He is a semiconductor pioneer and serial entrepreneur with over 50 years of experience in tech. He co-founded Actel Corporation and Aptics, holds 45 plus patents, and has authored over 70 peer-reviewed articles. And today he is the founder and CEO of Hope Artificial Intelligence, which uses AI to deliver STEM education to incarcerated individuals, as well as enlighten education and Silicon Valley ascent. So please welcome Dr. Amr Mohsen.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy to share with you some of my overall assessment of the ecosystem and the opportunities that we face. Just to tell you about myself, I'm originally from Egypt and came to this country to get my PhD in physics and electrical engineering from Caltech. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started first with Intel, and I was lucky to join Intel right after it went public and worked very closely with its founders, Gordon Moore and Andy Grove and Bob Noyce. I learned a lot, and I got involved in some of the early design of microprocessors, and saw how Intel management was very agile in pivoting originally from building RAMs, DRAM and SRAM, to microprocessors. Originally, Intel started to replace magnetic cores with RAMs. And the microprocessor, actually came as serendipity. They didn't intend it. It just fell in their lap, which is, again, an important message that was echoed through prior sessions here. Of being agile and pivoting at the right time. They were basically designing a couple of chips for different vendors in Japan and here for calculator, and they realized they could build one chip, a microprocessor, that served both of them. And that started the whole microprocessor revolution that we've witnessed since the 1970s. I also, after Intel, I started Actel. I was the founder and CEO of Actel that led the field of FPGA. FPGA is over $30 billion market. It exists in almost every consumer and telecommunication and space products. Actel were lucky to lead the FPGA market, went public in the 90s, and sold it after that to Microchip, then started Aptics. Which again pioneered the field of emulation and prototyping for complex system on chips, SoCs, and then sold that to Mentor, that was acquired by Siemens after that. Since then, I've been predominantly an angel investor, sit on the board of many companies, and recently got involved in several nonprofit activities. As you probably know, it's very hard to retire in Silicon Valley. There are a lot of exciting projects. And so having been in Silicon Valley since the 70s, I've witnessed the various generation of technology that come by, almost every decade. In the 70s were the microprocessors that became used in almost every electronic applications. After that came the PCs in the 80s, that Apple pioneered, and Microsoft built the full stack for the IBM PCs. After that came the 90s, where there have been a lot of PCs on engineers' desks and at homes. They need to be interconnected. And that's how the internet came along, and it was a technology already in the military with DARPA. and Netscape was the first to commercialize it. This evolution here, 70s, 80s, and 90s, put the foundation for what happened after that in the following 20 years. In 2007, we've seen the mobile application. How cell phones that used to be running CDMA and GSM and so on were augmented with processing and connection to the internet. And that again expanded a lot of application and many companies evolved. Into 2010 plus, cloud computing. Because again, having mobile devices and having a lot of data flow needed a cloud to be able to store it and communicate with it. So as you could see, every stage in the ecosystem led to the next one. And as we see today, the agentic AI and GPT, generative predictive transformer AI, is based on what has been done before. The immense amount of data that exists on the internet, and really the impressive evolution that happened that led, AI has been around, as you know, for 50 years. However, the difference that happened in the last 15 years is using neural network. And neural network, as you all know, really build on the architecture of our brain. Where we have neuron and synapses and everything is connected to each other. And the real clever things that building this neural network was available hardware like the GPU and building software on top of it led to this very impressive capability, recognition. And that leads to this amazing application that we've seen with ChatGPT and after that agentic AI. So we are really living in a very opportune time where there are several technology waves coming into practical use. Not only agentic AI and robotics, but we're also seeing other technologies, quantum computing. We're seeing also blockchain. We're seeing genomics. So many generations are progressing to the point that it creates a fantastic opportunity for entrepreneurs to make a difference, to create values. And as you could see here, the trillion-plus companies were all created during the 80s and the 90s, and during the last 30 to 40 years, and they were all based on this technology platform. And so we have an opportunity now with this technology waves that are coming our way in the 2020s to really build unique companies that would rival many of the prior companies. By the way, also to point out that a lot of those evolutions were based on physics. The semiconductor is based on the quantum mechanics that were developed in the early 20th century. How quantum mechanics led to the solid-state theory and semiconductors and the transistor and so on. And it's all well built on better understanding of physics. And that's what we expect to see also over the next 20 to 30 years. I have many slides here. I'm going to skip on some of them because they have been covered in prior sessions, and I'm going to focus on the one that I see most relevant. And feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me if you have any question on those slides. During 2025, 2026, the agentic AI really changed the landscape. GPT, when it came on the scene back in the end of 2022, was mostly used as a bot, putting prompts and getting answers and recognizing voices and so on. But the real impressive part is being able to use agentic AI to get a whole workflow that autonomously can complete tasks. And that's totally shifting the application of agentic AI to a whole new level that we're going to be seeing over the next few months and few years. Continuously, new products come along and really create significant value in work as well as in our daily life. And you need to understand the stack of the agentic AI. I mean, at the bottom level, it's the GPUs, the power, and the data centers. On top of it is the LLMs, and the frontier models. And then recently, as you heard from OpenClaw last year, the agentic AI platform, where people can easily build agents and have the agents communicate and orchestrate multi-functions between them. And the application layer is coming on top of that, and that's where the value is going to be. As you've seen from the 1990s and the following 20 years, the application layers provided more value and wealth than the picks and shovel. Google, for example, Facebook, Amazon, they're all application layer on top of the internet and the PCs. And we expect also this opportunity here to generate a lot of wealth and entrepreneur in order to make a difference, not only in our lives here, but also worldwide. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. This is what we call the picks and shovel layer. And, time will tell the value that gets generated from that. The current thinking is that LLMs are going to become a commodity. And open source are going to reduce the cost per million tokens significantly. What's going to be more exciting is the application you build on top of the LLMs that are going to become commodities, and how to automate and get workflow in companies as well as in our personal life, more effective. That's what I believe the value is gonna be seen. I mean, I give an example. Back in the 2000 plus, when I heard about Facebook, it was mainly a dating app in the universities, and they were going public as social media for people to share pictures and so on. I myself, didn't see much value in this, because what's the value of sharing, images and so on? However, the market proved otherwise. The market proved that the 2 billion plus that are connected on the Facebook platforms, provide significant amount of sharing and building a sense of closeness, okay, that didn't exist before. Again, as an old man, didn't see that, and I bet you many of us, the real innovation are going to come from the young generation. People who are now college grad, high school, because they're going to see things that we don't see. They're going to think outside the box. Yes. 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 Yes, absolutely. And again, there's going to still be a lot of innovation, at the picks and shovel. I mean, there are a lot of startups now building semiconductor chips that are more efficient than the GPUs. GPUs just they burn. One chip is almost a kilowatt. And that's why you need those power station next to a data center. I mean, you have to reflect on our brain. Our brain, consume 15, 20 watts, okay? And it's 1,500 centimeter cube, and it can perform many functions that those large LLMs that takes gigawatts to do. Those gigawatts, LLMs, can do more because they have access to more data, but eventually, a lot of the new chips are going to come behind those GPUs that are more efficient in power as well as more efficient in cost. I mean, there's a good example I refer to is, for example, aeroplanes. The motivation behind aeroplanes were the birds. How do they fly? Because they have wings that they spread. But the aeroplanes technology utilize those wings with the proper, airflow around them, and gives it a lot more energy, with the jets, that now it can fly a lot longer than a bird can, and have totally changed the transportation across the world. So giving energy to those neural networks, has created, immense availability of data and reasoning that our brain may not be able to comprehend in such a short time. But it really assists our brain. Our brain becomes more the critical thinker, the one that poses the question, and all the various answers can easily be collected by the LLM and the agents. The interesting thing is that, as was mentioned earlier in one of the prior sessions, is that, as easy as it is now to build new products, it's also, very difficult to have a moat around it. And that is an important factor that have to be taken into account whenever a product is being built. Don't use, features that LLMs will absorb it eventually. Think about the moat that make your product a lot more defensible and competitive. And the clever approach is to use the LLMs and this agentic AI to assist in the definition of the product, in the market analysis, the go-to-market strategy, the sales strategy, and so on. And so the key is going to be for an entrepreneur to build a viable company is to define a domain-specific venture where, expertise in that domain makes, the moat in being able to develop workflows in order to make the activities in that domain most productive. And I think what we've seen over the last 5-6 years since GPT was introduced is really fantastic. The cost per token has dropped over 90%. The multimode of using text and audio and video and images is properly very well fused. You can build a lot of application fusing all of those various modes, and the protocols of interfacing agents to each other have been developed and are working. And the other part that is important to many enterprises is the privacy. There is a lot of small LLMs that can, 50, 100 billion parameters. They're not the 1.5, 2 trillion parameters of the foundation models, but the small LLMs can run in an enterprise with privacy and confidentiality. run the risk of having their data leaked in the open market. So the landscape of building companies has changed. It used to be a startup is like a marathon. Now it's like a sprint. You know, it is now how to build something quickly, give it to customers, get feedback, and iterate it, and doing this many times, because the incumbent, the larger companies, cannot move as fast as the startup. And that is creating very different, very exciting dynamics in the marketplace for startups. And also, as I will mention later, also create different dynamics for venture capital investment. And the interesting thing, when you look at, over 50%, I think anywhere from 50 to 80% of the current venture investment is focused on AI. Apart from the picks and shovel, the chips that takes hundreds of millions of dollars to build, and the LLMs and so on, like OpenAI and Anthropic, apart from those, you find the majority of the investment is done in vertical apps, using agents and orchestration between the agents. And I'm just going to go through quickly here some example of some vertical agents that utilize the deep domain knowledge, and they have significant impact on many disciplines. In healthcare, in the legal side, you all heard about Harvey, how it's writing legal memos and making the legal decisions much faster. In education, I mean, the use of agents, again, in education is going to transform the whole education system. Instead of having classrooms where teachers, share the material with the students, the material is going to be available to students, without the teacher. The classroom becomes more, where the teacher guide and help the students develop critical thinking and judgment. This is what we call the reverse classroom model. So the education will become, those tools will become adaptive, personalized. They will be able to mentor the learner real time, and it's going to also improve the reskilling and upskilling at a very large scale. But again, to emphasize here, the mode that we recommend for you to think about whenever you have a new idea and a new venture is how your domain expertise and the data that you're going to use are going to give you the defensibility. Yes. Well, the value of an agent here is that autonomous. Once you define to it the workflow and the criteria, it can do the work 24 hours a day. So, okay, a friend of mine had a company that has 100 agents, and if he were to replace those agents with worker, it would be 50 employees. And he can program the agents regularly, orchestrate them, and get similar output as he would have had, tens of employees. So the key here is to have deep domain knowledge of what the agent is going to do, define the workflow, and define the interface between the various agents, what we call orchestration. That is going to really create very efficient companies that are mean, less staff, less capital intensive, and be able to deliver, output that would have taken, 10, 20 years ago, millions of dollars and hundreds of employees. Well, you know, it is a, as it was mentioned earlier, there is a paradox, general paradox, where things, as they get better and cheaper, they're used more. Okay, and we've seen this, you know, in semiconductor, you know, where the cost per transistor was dropping down by, you know, a factor of 2 to 3 every year. And at the beginning, back in the 70s, you know, a lot of investors were scratching their head, how I'm going to make money. However, they found out later, you know, that the use of those transistors expanded beyond what they were thinking about. And that expansion here is what is going to really build up a sizable market that we may not be able to comprehend it right now. Some of the other opportunities here, as I mentioned, the picks and shovels, that will continue. That tends to be capital intensive, but it's important because the current picks and shovels we have are not that efficient. They need a lot of improvement. Just to go back in the 1970s and 80s, where Intel was developing the 8086, you know, and after that came other generation, you know, from ARM, lower power, and other from AMD. So the generation, the picks and shovels, is going to continue. And they will be well funded, but they need a lot more capital assets to drive them. This is an important you know, opportunity as well to think about, is that this agentic AI is going to address the labor market. You know, not just the tools and the software make them, you know, more efficient and so on. And the labor market is $5 trillion plus. And being able to replace entry-level jobs and jobs that can be automated with agents is going to be a great opportunities. And again, it depends on domain knowledge and, you know, professional understanding of what it takes to provide value to the user. This, again, to emphasize that be careful about building a moat. Don't think features are going to be enough defensibility, because they can easily be absorbed by models and become commodity. You know, the defensibility is going to be based on your data and your domain knowledge and what you can build in relationship with the customer. And, you know, the playbook has changed for startups, as you may have heard from other speakers. You know, the playbook now is to have a quick looping, be able to build, you know, give to customer, and be able to improve it and pivot, and being able to orchestrate different agents together, and being able to use the LLMs to do a lot of your you know, go-to-market strategy and competitive analysis. And you know, one thing that was quite, you know, eye-catching is that they made a study about the cost of converting a lead into real sales. And as you could see here, it reduced the cost by over 80%. So those are the areas where, you know, startups have to comprehend in order to, you know, apply efficiently. Interesting also is that this agentic AI era and the related technologies are not only affecting how to start a company and how to scale it up, but it's also affecting venture investment. Because, you know, as the venture investors, you know, the common word is what they call the barbell. Because startups now don't need as much capital to get started. So they will invest $1, $2, $3, $5 million in an early seed stage or pre-seed stage. But on the other hand, they would be investing $100 million or $1 billion in some of the picks and shovel. That barbell, gives them the ability to leverage the market. So the fact that a startup can generate revenue without significant funding is a very important change in the landscape. And also, it let investment for angel investor a lot more productive. So for an investor, the most important risk is to differentiate between, hype and substance. Because somebody can add a label AI to the product is not enough to be a good investment. They have to really look at the substance and how it's going to create value in the marketplace with its proprietary data as its moat and defensibility. So to recap here, the real playbook we recommend for founders is to pick a wedge, an area that you are expert in, and you have very specific domain knowledge, and find significant problems in that area to solve and use agentic AI for. Again, there are differences of opinion here. From an investment point of view, any angel investor or venture investor like to see a paying customer. You may have some free customer at the beginning, but having a paying customer because it authenticates the value proposition. The next 24 months are going to be quite exciting. We're going to see significant advances in the inter-agent economy. Of course, there's going to be a lot of structuring and guardrails being developed for the liability of the agents. And many of the companies are going to be borderless. They're not going to be only serving, the US market. By nature, they'll be serving, worldwide markets. It's a similar thing for commerce. Commerce is it's really going to have multi-agents talking to each other and negotiating and settling deals in a very efficient way without having to go to, a central authority. And it's very important. And building startups is hard. I think you all heard about the chasm, that most startups, they start first with a level of high enthusiasm, and then they meet realities and how difficult it is, and it takes more time and more money and so on. Of course, using the agentic AI tools is going to help. But it's very important to really have a good team and mentors and community where you can relate to and be able to learn from what other people have done. And one of the ecosystems that we have built here, the Silicon Valley Entrepreneurship Club, it's a nonprofit organization. We started a few years ago. And its goal is really to serve our communities, our Muslim communities. We mentor entrepreneurs, we provide live events where we invest accomplished keynote speakers to share their experiences. Most of our activities, actually all of our activities are in mosques in order to help our entrepreneur tie to the community so that when they have successful exit, after that, they give back to the community. And we have workshops and boot camps, again, in order to train. And we provide really a continuous path from helping getting grants, angel funding, and introduces them to the VCs at the right time. So take advantage of these capabilities that we have. And, to wrap up here, this is an opportune time for founders. You're in Silicon Valley, which is a unique part of the world that has, all of the necessary ingredients from culture, from funding, from resources, and just realize that what makes you successful, what I call the 3 Ps. Have to have a passion for what you want to do. You have to have patience, and you have to be flexible and be able to pivot. This opportunity here doesn't come often, especially in Silicon Valley. So we invite you to join the Entrepreneurship Club. It's a nonprofit, and you can pick up the QR code and become a member, and you get exposed to all of our events, our boot camps, our workshops that we hold regularly every month. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for bringing it up. Oh, yes. In order to get a successful project, you need to have a team. So, building a team, as a matter of fact, there is like what you hear in real estate, the 3 important things, the location, location, location. In venture capital investment, it's the team, the team, the team. Because, a team can take a B- or B+ plan and pivot and make it A+. And a B team can take an A+ plan and destroy it. So the domain, for example, if you want an example of, just to clarify the domain here, if somebody wants to build, an agentic mentor software that will assist a learner as a mentor, and that will assess their progress, will feed them the proper material, adaptive.